Excellent. All right, let's see. We're gonna have to set up so that way I'm facing the camera. So if you guys want to kind of come over here, and John, I'll grab you.
You're the snitcher about to try to learn for
Yeah.
2 years.
So, before we get into any sort of further chokes, we're gonna actually pick up where we left off with the clock choke. Continue. And so quick review. Obviously, you guys just drilled this out, but I have John's back here, clock choke. I have my back mount. Right, I've used the blade of the wrist dynamic and pinned it to his chest where he extends his arm away, which allows me to flare open this lapel. I turn the lapel over. I get the deep collar grip to where my elbow should basically be kind of, if not directly in front of his chin, it's like rotated much farther forward than, like, say, right here. Thumb should be behind the back of the neck on this grip. Okay, near. And then our main parameters to finishing the clock choke, number one, I grab the lapel, I pull the lapel towards the floor, and I puff my chest into him. At this point, everything else is basically the same. Flick of the wrist, Bill Clinton, fishing pole, whatever you want to call it. Now, so now we're going to reverse positions for a second. Now, there's a really common way that people are going to prevent this choke from happening or escape. And it's really not even so much escape the choke as much as it is alleviate the lethality of it, right? So what'll happen is, let's say, John, you start getting these grips in, and you get everything right. Extend away, you get the thing deep collar, perfect, and he gets the lapel. They're going to do two big motions to fight this choke. Number one is going to be to rotate toward the choke side. Now, obviously, we should all know that I always want to go towards the underhook side, and like you would better just be super loosey-goosey with your head positioning. And I mean, if he does that, like, well, yeah, obviously I'm going to go this way. This is the best possible way I can get out of this. But if John is doing a good job being Master Yoda, and his head is basically tucked over here, I'll never be able to go that way. So I have to go towards the choke side, which is a risky proposition, but it does do a couple of things. So I'm rotating my body, and in the same way, essentially, he would rotate his body. But the thing that I'm going to do, and the thing that people will do to alleviate the pressure on this, is I'm going to posture up. I might even try to bridge my head to the floor and get here, okay? And this does a couple of things. So I want to set back up, John, and I want you to go and get those grips nice and tight in there, like real, right? And so if he were to apply the pressure for the choke, go ahead. You should be able to finish it. So go ahead and like give a little bit of pressure. So as I'm going out, rotating, I get here. All right, there's a couple of things that I've done here that, while I am clearly uncomfortable, you can hear my voice is strained, I'm not getting choked. Even though I put some pressure on that finish, it's like, it's going to be kind of hard for him to really cinch this in, especially if I'm fighting the hands and all this. There's a couple of things that I've done here that fight this choke. Number one is, as you can see, I brought my back off of the track of, here, I'll do this at this point, just so I can, I brought my back off of the track where his sternum is going to press against me. So it's like, even like, go ahead and try to press, like, do the choke and press your sternum against me. It's like, it's not really the same degree of pressure. The more that I get out this way, the less it's doing anything. And the other thing is, I've started to put a real strain on this grip. If you ask John, his wrist is starting to get kind of like bent up pretty uncomfortably. By getting this posture, I start fighting the hands. For the record, guys, we'll talk about this more when we do our background escape semester, but always fight at the pointer knuckle. So I don't want to grab at the wrist, I want to fight at the pointer knuckle and peel there. Another topic for another day. Okay. And basically they're going to work to break these grips and loosen up, break these grips and escape in our sort of standard background escape mechanism. So let me switch positions with you now. So we're going to work to exploit this escape, because while it is effective against alleviating the tension of the clock choke, it does put them directly in the path for another higher percentage choke, which is the bow and arrow. Now, I want to clarify one thing before we get to this. So John, the way this is going to work, have a choke, let's go ahead and get to it, boom, have my positioning, and then you're going to, almost like you're trying to rotate to face me, which turn to your right. Yep, and then bridge your head to the floor. Right, exactly. So if I try to go to the bow and arrow choke, which is the next place that we're going, from this situation, with him laying on top of my leg, and my elbow, okay, it's going to be very difficult. Just stay right there. It's hard. Even if I adjust my grip out, and so you see how weak my grip is starting to get, it's going to be very difficult to make this transition. So, now not impossible. We'll go into the mechanics of using my elevator hook to reset. That's a different lesson for a different day. But strictly speaking, can you get your back again, please? If I am trying to go to the bow and arrow choke directly from this path of escape, I have to make this transition as they're making this transition. So again, I'm not attacking for this bow and arrow choke once they've gotten to this position where they've rotated their body and their head's going to the mat. I am attacking for it as they're making that transition. Okay, pretty simple, right? There are two major positional adjustments I'm going to make to put myself in the scenario of the bow and arrow choke. Number one, so we'll say I have the clock choke, boom, I'm here, he starts pivoting off to the side. I'm going to kick my leg towards his armpit and rotate so that my sternum is going to basically line up with his shoulder. All right, so we'll go back, so we rotate back. I was here, he starts trying to like turn to face me and put your head to the floor and all this, kicking and rotating. It'll almost shelf onto my elbow and knee, okay? The other major adjustment, if you guys notice right now, my grip has sort of slid out. Let's stitch you up just a little bit, to where I'm now just kind of in front of him. If I put pressure, that'll be right on your windpipe, right? Right. My grip wants to slide out to the shallow collar grip position that we discussed. So if you guys remember, we talked about deep collar grip. My thumb would go behind the neck. Behind the neck. For the shallow collar grip, my thumb wants to be in front of the neck. Okay, so this is the positioning. So if I were, so we'll go back to the top. So if I were here, he starts shifting out to the side. I kick, I rotate, and I slide here to where thumb would be in front of the neck, and that little knot on my wrist is going to be against the carotid artery. From here, we're ready to go to a finish. Okay. We're going to start out with the most common, and we're going to break to work on this, and I'm going to go over some variations and stuff, just kind of some odds and ends. So, once I get to this position, I want to accomplish two things. One is I want to get a hold of this leg, and two, I want to get control of this shoulder. The ways I'm going to do that is I'm going to rotate towards, and I can either underhook the knee, or most commonly, you doing okay down there, John? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to grab the pants on the outside, this big bundle of fabric right here. What I want to do is this leg wants to hop over top of his shoulder, and I want to make a closed guard. From here, I'm going to, so let me just have you sit here for just a second. I'm going to pull my arms back like I'm doing like a really poorly formed, kind of like, what's that machine where you do like the back of your shoulder where you kind of go out? Yeah, I think there's a deltoid, right? Rear delt. Like a rear delt, yeah. That's kind of the motion. So it's not so much like a lat row where you're going straight back, it's more like that rotational, like the outer elbows going out. As I do that, I'm going to press my hips forward, pull my feet down. So all together, I'll get right to the choke position. I'm here, grab the pants, over the shoulder, lock my guard. My feet are going down, my hips are going forward, and my arms are going back while I do my fishing pole. It's a lot of little steps, like a lot of little people. Okay, down there? Yeah. Cool. Sorry, that one's fucking savage. Yeah, that one's savage. The bow and arrow choke is like the most ruthless choke you can get on somebody. It's basically the best choke in the whole series. It's good to, well, we'll talk about that. Actually, we'll talk about that now. Now, you may ask yourself, as I go into from the clock choke to the bow and arrow, is the order of operations that we're laying out here arbitrary? Right? Like in the sense of, is it arbitrary that I go from the clock to the bow and arrow to the this to the that? Can I go from the bow and arrow to the clock, et cetera, et cetera? And the truth is, basically, I mean, kind of in a sense, like you could transition from one to the other. I mean, you still have collar grip, you still have body control. But the reality is that it's always transitioning from any of the other collar chokes we're going to show in the series back to the clock choke will always be harder than transitioning from any of those to the clock or from the clock choke and to each other, right? So if you imagine we have, let me think, it's 4 major chokes that we're going to work on in this collar choke set. going from the clock choke to any one of those three is easier, and going from any one of those three to each other is easier than any of them getting to the clock choke. Because the positional dynamic of having myself against, essentially pressed behind their shoulder blades, or like one shoulder blade, and having this deep collar grip, back a little bit, this deep collar grip is always going to be harder to get back to than it is to just slide out and get to that shallow. I can get to it from a deep to a shallow without letting go of my grip. To get to a shallow to a deep, I gotta like finagle my hand up there. Doesn't mean it's impossible. Doesn't mean you can't do it. But it does mean that it's gonna be much more difficult, a much lower percent. So, just review it real fast, and then we'll partner up, and then we'll work on a couple of odds and ends. I'm in the back now. I have my clock choke, right? In here. I started over, and he starts pivoting off to the side, so I'm almost stomping my foot and kicking into his armpit. Almost if you think of it like a flower sweep kind of motion. Kicking in the armpit, stomping my foot. I get to this point where I'm now, my sternum is sort of lined up with the shoulder. From here, I want my grip to slide to that shallow collar grip position. This is kind of like, at what point this happens in the sequence is not super important unless you care about like not smushing their windpipe at all. I.e., I can keep this here, make my adjustments, and then just put pressure and slide out, you know, to when, until he starts tapping, basically. But ultimately, if I want to make it a clean choke, I want to end up with the blade of my wrist, like the little knot on my wrist, right against the carotid artery. I have the lapel. My leg goes over the shoulder. I lock a guard, and I like to grab the pants at the knee, the fabric. But again, you can grab underneath the leg. We'll go into the length about that in a second. And then the motions are my elbows doing like this deltoid thing, like elbows going back and out, my feet going down, and my hips pressing forward. You want to see that, John?
Yeah, please.
Tony, okay.
I'm sorry, it's pretty locked up down there. It's like you can't escape.
It's a pretty tough spot to get out of once you get to that little sort of when you're sitting in the lap like that. So I'm here. Let's rotate a little bit this way, please. Perfect. Thank you. So I have my. Oh, by the way, a little adjustment, guys. I'll say this for the camera because I was noticing you guys work around this a little bit. So if they're like kind of taller and maybe like so right, you know, Tony here, he's got kind of hard for me to reach over. What I can do is pull him back, but keep my alignment, right? So I'm still hips behind shoulders, but I kind of recline him, and then I can get in nice and deep on this collar. So that would be the way to make that adjustment. If our sometimes they're going to be tall, it's just shape difficult to get to the scenario. Anyway, I'm going for my clock choke. He starts pivoting, right? So let's say, in this case, Tony, you're going to be, right, exactly. So I stop and I kick. From here, I'm going over the shoulder, sliding out to the shallow collar grip, right? I have the pants at the knee. My leg is going over. I want to lock up a guard, and then I'm pushing my feet down, hips forward, and pulling back on those grips. So it's this, all of them obviously have this, and then feet down, hips forward, like that. That make sense, guys? Excellent. Let's partner up, work out. 1, 2, 3. That was good for you guys working together.